up, guys? Here
Yeah.
again. Another one inside blockchain interview with James Burnie of GunnerCooke LLP. And he is a blockchain lawyer, shall we say, a blockchain and cryptocurrency lawyer working within the regulatory framework of the UK. And I suppose all around the world also as well. So we'll be finding out from him today some of what is going on in his job and what he does within the space. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? It's great to be on.
Very, very good. Very, very good. It's coming back with the nice summery weather in the UK now, so we're getting prepared, as we were saying just a minute ago, about everybody coming out of their hole. So yeah, doing well. So in true BTC Bros style, we always ask first, why do you do what you do?
Because it's fun. It's probably not the answer you normally get from a lawyer. I mean, so I'm a regulatory lawyer. We like coming up with new solutions to innovative ideas. We like kind of the black letter side of things. And one of the great things about blockchain and cryptocurrency is it gives you the ability to look at the existing frameworks and where they're going and come up with kind of new ideas which fit within there. And it's one of the areas where we get genuine innovation for change on the legal side, whereas some areas of law you feel you're copy and pasting. With here, you can actually come up with proper bespoke new products. And a lot of the time you can create things which are new ideas helping people, consumers, retail. Some of them have charitable benefits and all the rest of it. So you're bringing new ideas to the table and genuine innovation, which is always great fun to work with.
Definitely, 100%. And that's what the space is all about. It's exactly what it's all about. What was your inspiration for getting involved in the blockchain industry specifically?
Sure. So I kind of fell into it rather than a well thought out plan. So many years ago now, I read about this thing called blockchain and I gave a presentation on it to an audience of asset managers, mainly because it was something of interest to me more than anything else. And 99.999% of them interested me entirely blankly, apart from one individual at the back who kept asking me questions. And the annoying question answer at the end of it turned up and said, actually, you're the only lawyer at the moment who cares about this. Do you want to do something called an ICO? And I didn't know what an ICO was, so I said yes. And it was a fascinating learning experience, and it kind of all came out from there. So I acted on the first ICO that seemed to get me a certain level of fame or notoriety, pick the right word for it, given it's an ICO within the community. I went on to act with another client who did kind of one of the first equity issuances settled on chain, and it just grew and grew from there because a lot of these projects have a regulatory angle to it. And one of the reasons the whole thing works really quite well is the first question usually for blockchain or crypto type products is what are the regulatory implications of what we're doing? And usually the regulatory lawyer is the last person you ever want to speak to at the bottom of the list, and you leave them in a small dark room. It's the one area where the clients will actually come and find me and ask me what they should do before they even start the ball running, which is flattering and quite nice.
Definitely. So it must have been quite a surprise that day as well when you got that approach, and it's just like, wow, there's some, again, because he's thinking there's somebody that actually cares, and you're standing there, giving your speech, and you're thinking, wow, there's somebody that actually cares, and then
it's nice for people who actually care about what you do. And that's a slightly weird way of putting it, but normally the lawyers are the last painful hurdle you have to get through, and you sit there and you cringe and you sort of just want rid of out of your life as fast as humanly possible. And I have some sympathy for that view. But what's nice about it is actually, if you can get this sort of stuff to work, then you're the sort of people you're working with genuinely care about regulation and generally want it to work. I mean, I know there are different camps. There are those who love regulation, those who hate regulation in the crypto world, of which, and you sort of, it's two different sides. Although there is the magical moment when someone who hates regulation, something happens which causes a complete turn, and it's like sort of they left one cult and joined another, and they riffed the we hate regulation bots into the we love regulation bots, and some of the biggest regulation fans I've ever met.
Yeah, we used to have a joke about that, like a joke amongst me and Jonathan about the regulators. Like we used to play, you know, Warren G's Regulate. So we used to play that every time. Like we'd be laughing like our heads off, like when somebody just starts saying that, because it just pops up in your mind. So we walk away from the conversation and we'll be like, regulators. So yeah, like
Yeah.
funny stuff, man. But that does bring me on to my next question, actually, which is, when looking at the borderless capabilities of blockchain and crypto, would you agree that both may have disrupted or be on the path to disrupt governance and regulation even more than their impact on finance?
I think there's a couple of interesting things at play here. First of all, as a UK lawyer, there's a move in any event for regulation and governance to change. And that starts with something called the FCA sandbox, which is like, it's like when you do drug testing, you give the drug to the patient and see if they keel over. And if they are better at the end of it, you let the wider public get to it. That started with the FCA sandbox. And the reason that was such a watershed moment for the whole regulator community is it was moving from regulators just going, you cannot do this, to regulators actually entering into more competition in terms of we have to encourage the market and we have to promote innovation. So that was kind of one of the first bits, because it's a regulator mindset. What you then got with blockchain and crypto was a move towards saying, you've now got a community of people who are genuinely multinational and they will move from country to country. So when you get a ban in a country, that doesn't mean everyone shuts down. What it means is everyone moves to a different jurisdiction where it can work. And that then creates a couple of interesting points. It creates arbitrage. And you either like the arbitrage or you hate it. In some ways, it's a bad thing, in the sense that if there's something you genuinely do not want to have from a public policy perspective, then actually stopping that can be really quite difficult, because the people can just move from place to place. But on the flip side, what it means is that there has to be an element of restraint on behalf of the regulator side of it. And one of the interesting questions, which from my perspective, is the whole negative interest rate question. In ye olde days, if they said there'd be negative interest rates in a country, then that would be taken as granted. In the current climate, though, if you have a negative interest rate, will that lead to everyone buying Bitcoin? Will that lead to capital moving into crypto assets, moving on to platforms where you can't physically have negative rates? And what will the effect of that be? So it impacts the ability of people to set the agenda. And it also creates a whole host of new things. For example, central bank digital currencies. The traditional payments mechanism within the banks was premised on a very old concept of money physically moving from A to B. With blockchain, that doesn't exist anymore, so you can get speed. And also, flip side, can give powers to the regulator. So if you take something like capital adequacy, if you take Lehman Brothers didn't go bust because it ran out of money. It went bust because people stopped believing it had money. If Lehman Brothers had held all of its cash on a blockchain, such as you could see in real time how much money Lehman Brothers had, and a regulator could go, we can see the accounts on the blockchain, this is what Lehman Brothers has, this is what it can settle, then there's an open question as to whether Lehman Brothers would still be here today, because you could have had that extra confidence that transactions would have settled. People would have settled those transactions, not everyone would have run on the bank, and the bank would still be here. So it opens up a plethora of new ideas. But there is one thing which I'm always very keen on with the whole blockchain crypto aspect, which is something I call legal entity dependence, which is people get very carried away with how blockchain and crypto assets are decentralized. But actually, what does that actually mean? Because if you take something like Bitcoin is potentially the most iconic decentralized platform, but actually it's centralized on every single person who runs a node or holds Bitcoin. So there is an element of centralization there. And then when you look at actually in proper depth, what you discover is all these blockchains will have a governance person or an entity behind it, or an administrator, or someone who's running the show. And as soon as you have someone who's running the show, you have someone you can lock up. And that's why, from the regulator perspective, if you want to exert proper influence over a blockchain, you look at the person running it, the administrator, and you control them, and through them you can control the wider network. So the whole decentralization thing you have to be very careful of, because it is to some extent a myth. And equally, the regulators, and this was something that cyber libertarians had well back with the Wide Web. There was a school of law which was the World Wide Web is international, because it's a website, anyone can see it, therefore we're outside the law. Actually, the exact opposite happens. If you're not careful, every regulator in every country at the same time announces you're subject to its jurisdiction. So you go from complying with one set of rules to 150 sets of rules, and the whole thing falls apart. So it's not a question of kind of, you've got two basic options. That there is the I'm just going to pay Pirates of the Caribbean option, and there is the I'm going to comply option, if you see what I mean. Our lawyers was going to push you towards the comply option. And people, but people will try the Pirates of the Caribbean option, and sometimes they may get away with it, and sometimes they won't. But if you spectacularly annoy a regulator, they're not going to be nice to you as a result, if you see what I mean. So you've got to be very careful that you don't just assume that everything's okay. And I had a guy a month back who came up with something. He basically said, "I don't apply the law because I'm blockchain." And I said, "Well, you are aware that if you do this, they will." I can't say exactly what it was, but it was something which was guaranteed to get people's attention, if you see what I mean. And they will respond, if you see what I mean. So, I don't really want that. I said, well, if you're not going to do that, then just don't do it. It's best to get something which works. And regulators are not there to try and stop things. Where they stop things, it's either because they're worried about it, or they don't understand it, or they're scared of it, if you see what I mean. So a lot of it is how you position yourself. Now, people will tell you how to deal with regulators, and that's fine. But if you go out there and you straight break things, then these are human beings. If they think you're dodgy before you walk in, you're not going to get anywhere. So you're far better off talking around, explaining it, and all the rest of it, and then you'll get a far better shot at creating something which works, and that's best for everyone.
And that was actually part of my next question, that last bit that you answered, because I was going to say how difficult you feel that it would be for, let's say, if you have that situation, you get all of these world governments together and they say, oh, well, look, let's shut it down, or, let's enforce some kind of regulatory policy like that. It kind of makes it in this fashion. Like, how difficult, again, coming from a lawyer, how difficult do you think that is to have that kind of situation?
Well, they're already all talking to each other. But regulators all know each other, if you see what I mean. They don't live in a little box, if you see what I mean. And there are things like the global sandbox is an example of a whole of regulators coming together. The FCA have entered into memorandum of understanding with various countries where the regulators are going to work together on fintech. So these conversations are already happening. One thing it's worth being very aware of, though, is there are different tribes of regulatory thought in the world. And this is where it becomes, there's a social, political element to regulation. And put it in very kind of broad terms, everyone wants to do the right thing. Different cultures have different ideas as to what the right thing is. So if you take kind of the European view, Europe is about the rights of the individual. So you've got data protection regulation, it's about individual rights and so on, because from a European mindset, the individual is the person who should be looked after. If you take China, the Chinese view is the state makes the best decision because it acts on behalf of all the people, and therefore the entire mindset when you walk in is actually it's the state which has to be taken seriously. If you're in the US, it's more the private company is seen as the important point, because the private company, which they see is generating wealth, which is then to the benefit of everyone else. And because you have those three different ways of viewing the world, depending on which view you take, you're going to have different priorities when you walk into blockchain, crypto, and all the rest of it. So the Chinese view is from a state perspective, what does the state think of it? Does the state support it or not? Will be one of the questions that they will tend to have, because their view is the state is acting on behalf of everyone to try and get it to work. In Europe, you've had a lot of debate about things like GDPR and the like, and that's because you've got the tension between the rights of the individual's data and the right of the company to use that data to make things work. And even more fundamentally, just the way that different regulators are financially rewarded will impact how they see it. So In the US, you have the SEC, the CFTC, you have FINRA, and you've got a different regulator in each country. The size of the pot which a regulator has in order to, the cash, the size, the prestige of the regulator is determined by the ambit of what it covers, which is why you tend to get multiple regulators in the US will take a view on something, because each one of them want to make crypto part of its overall thinking, because that makes them more important. In the UK, you have the FCA and the PRA. The PRA are interested in things like banks and insurance firms. So for blockchain firms, it's generally just the FCA. And therefore, there isn't that impetus in the room to say, I want to take this. It's more a question of, I need to do what I need to do. It's less a sort of, I need to capture more. It's more what I've been told to do by law that I have to cover. So it affects different things. And that's why, when you start off, it's worth, figuring out what are you creating, where you're looking to go, where are the participants based? Because if you create something which covered, say, the UK, Europe, and maybe Abu Dhabi, some of the Arab countries, though most of their rules are have a similar basis, and therefore it's relatively easy to create something which complies with all of those. Where you get a migraine is if you go, I want to create something which concern both Europe, the UK as one group, and then the US as another group. Because the US takes a far different approach, you end up with a lot more complexity. And that's why, these things, it's worth putting thought into, you have your home country, there's the place you grew up. That's those rules you will understand best. But part of the thing to think about is which other countries naturally go with your country with less headache, because what you don't want to do is spend your entire life paying legal bills. Seriously.
Of course not. Of course not. So what do you feel with all of this that we've said, right, so far? Because we've touched on a bit of finance and we've touched on a bit of regulatory and also human rights. So what do you feel or what do you find that is most important about blockchain technology itself?
Blockchain technology, there's the blockchain of itself, but there's the excuse it gives. And what I mean by that is when you bring blockchain to a situation, what you seem to do is you seem to greenlight a whole lot of innovation, ideas, and all the rest of it. And what I find fascinating about it is how when you have someone who as soon as you bring blockchain or crypto assets in the room as a potential solution, immediately people start thinking again. And what you get is you get entire industries where people just haven't really been thinking. So they just, this is the way it is. We assume that's the way it is. It's never gone wrong. Therefore, we continue to do it. Blockchain gives people that excuse to redo everything they want to do. And it gives people the impetus to try and look at completely new things. So to give you a sort of an immediate example, if you take something like student debt. Now, student debt basically involves, I want to go to university, I take a lot of debt on, I pay a huge interest rate back to the bank, and that was just acceptance, that's the way it was. Now, if you took a blockchain to that, you go, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll take generic student debt terms and we'll put them on a blockchain. We'll write the bond once then. We'll let you click down 3 buttons, how much you're going to borrow, the interest rate and all the rest of it, fine. And we'll give it across family and friends. So what you manage to do in that fast food, because you could issue the entire thing for say 100 quid, and the interest rate is whatever your friends and family support. The payments between the banks can all be automated so that they're not worried about you sort of disappearing off to the wherever with the cash. And suddenly you've created a competitor to student debt, which is cheaper, faster, slicker, and all the rest of it. And it's not necessarily reliant on a particular bank to work. So you don't have that issue of the small number of banks, the only people you can go to, which means you can bring down the interest rate because it's friends and family. Now, you then go, that's a solution. Now, you could do the same thing. You probably have the same cost without blockchain. Blockchain is helpful to it. But it then starts an entire debate then around, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to bring down costs? What can we actually do here? And those are the sorts of interesting ones because it becomes the enabler towards new ideas. The other thing I find funny is you get waves in industry. So a lot of the early people in the space tended to be ex-bankers because you had the Lehman Brothers crash, a lot of people left the banking industry, A lot of them did fintech courses to discover blockchain, and they went straight back to the banks with new ideas. It then spread from banking to asset management, because you've got questions over, if you're a fund manager, are you really giving a return to your customers and all the rest of it? You have to have a brand new shiny idea. It became blockchain. And you're just getting away from industry to industry now, as people, currently it's kind of music, NTFs, and art is the latest industry to fall in love with the whole blockchain concept.
Yeah.
And after that, there'll be another industry which comes in after, and then there is a sort of wave effect.
It's funny
like
that you mentioned the student loans as well, because that is, again, the student finance is something that with what we're presenting with our upcoming project is something that we're also looking into as well. Student finance is a big part of it. So it's quite funny that you said all of that. Yeah. So, but we'll have another talk about that one. Definitely much closer to the date. Only a couple of weeks to go before we start actually talking about it and new websites up. But what I would say as well, also, because this is a lot of stuff's been going on over the past year, right? A lot of stuff's been going on regulatory wise in the past, let's say 12 months, especially because coronavirus, the rest of it, right? So one of those things is the new AML5, the anti-money laundering laws that came in, and I've seen some of it. I haven't read all the way through it, and but it definitely does somewhat cross over into the realms of the processes that most people are used to, I would say, in the crypto space. So would you say that there's anything that you could advise or just, throw out there that are specific things that you've noticed in that particular regulation that would affect the, let's say, everyday crypto user?
So, I mean, there are two regimes to be aware of. There's the traditional old-fashioned securities regime, which is what we were obsessed with before MLD5. Now, MLD5 is brought in a new, remit. I mean, the short of it is there are three activities. There's looking after crypto assets for someone else. There's the exchange of crypto assets or money for crypto assets and vice versa, what you would consider an exchange or brokerage. And then there's this horrible extra bit, which is making arrangements with a view to a transaction. And the reason it's horrible is because it's broad and it's vague. And it's been lifted from securities rules, which have far more around them in terms of exemptions, guidance, and all the rest of it. And it's just been plonked into the world of crypto without a huge amount of explanation. And that then creates a problem, because the first question is not getting caught by that, if you see what I mean. And that's where, either you're definitely in, fine, you're definitely out, fine. But if you don't know, that's where getting legal advice is helpful, because one of the things you'll walk into, someone might ask you, why is it you've not been registered? And the FCA have put out a list of those firms which the FCA believes should be registered but aren't registered. So we name it the naughty list, but that's probably not politically correct, so if you see what I mean. But that list exists, and you don't really want to be on that, because you go back to when you speak to the regulator. If you start off on the naughty list, it's not a good opening moment. So if you're in that position where you don't know if you are or you aren't, but you get a competent lawyer to give you an opinion, then that's the sort of thing you can then give to the FCA, and the FCA will ask you whether you've had that sort of legal advice, and that will impact your relationship with them a lot. Because if you have tried your best to, everyone acknowledges that's a vague area. Therefore, legal advice from someone, the FCA knows you're not trying to be dishonest, you're not trying to be cryptic, and it will change the nature of your conversation. If they decide you need to be registered, they'll tell you to get registered, and you can go through the process, if you see what I mean. But you've now shown that you're trustworthy in that sense. You're not setting out there to break the rules. It's just that you think one thing, they think the other thing, and you've decided to go with it. And actually, one of the things I've seen is actually the regulator might well take that and go, right, well, if the lawyer thinks that, and it seems vaguely sensible, that's fine. That we'll let that go through, because someone has thought about this and come up with it, and you've now got that proper, we'll call an audit trail. You need to have a piece of paper there, which is the audit trail. So if anyone has questions, you've got that. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is the actual act of getting the registration. To be blunt, registration is not a helpful word here, because people hear the word registration and think quick and easy process. It is not. It is a long, slow, painful process which you have to sort of initiate. You know, and this is where, if you don't mind, so the rules is worth being conscious. The rules were not designed for this originally. The rules were designed originally for stopping money laundering. Stopping money laundering is not an authorization type thing. You don't get licensed to stop money laundering. But it's been reinterpreted that when it went through the European directive, it got turned into that. And then it got dumped on everyone's doorstep of, oh, by the way, there's now an authorizations regime off the back of it. And it's the result of it is it's not thought through. So if you take Europe, for example, their equivalent, all authorization regime, you know, virtually all authorization regimes in Europe, once you get in one country, you can move to any other country because all of them are considered the same. Yeah. Not true for crypto. Every country takes a different view, and a regulator might decide they don't like it. In the UK, we've got the authorization. The FCA, as part of it, I mean, told to make sure people are fit and proper to run a crypto asset business. Fit and proper, what does that mean? Yeah. So what you then get is the FCA are worried about, you know, the frauds, the scams, letting someone go through who goes wrong and all the rest of it. And this is new to them, because if you grow up in the world of blockchain and crypto, your immediate first thought isn't to join the FCA. Yeah. And that's not, you know, if you're on the innovation side, so the FCA are having to catch up as to what the rest of the industry is doing. And we're seeing moves, positive moves from the FCA. I mean, they've hired in a whole lot of people to help progress the applications faster. They are keen to make the UK a central hub for blockchain and crypto, and they want to get it right. But, you know, one of the crypto hubs in the past had 4 ICOs linked to terrorist activity, and the entire crypto industry died that afternoon. We don't want to repeat here. And that's why, and at the same time, you know, there are plenty of scams and fraudulent schemes going on, and their immediate concern is going to be to stop that. And, you know, that takes resource out the system to deal with the registration. So yes, it's a slow, painful process with people who will be nervous, people who do not want to let through a scam. And as a result, they're going to ask lots and lots and lots of questions, if you see what I mean. And it is what it is, if you see what I mean. Now, the other thing I just want to make clear is, one thing you're aware of is because it took so long, they brought in a temporary list of firms which are registered. Yeah. Those firms can operate, if you see what I mean, as businesses, and therefore that you're on to a good one there. Your biggest problem is getting in now, because the cutoff for that list is long past, and that's why one of the things that I personally am going to be pushing for is either we move on the backlog, or we create another temporary list, because, you know, temporary can be so much alike. I mean, it's just a word.
Yeah, as long as a piece of string in it, really. Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to put. Whether it happens or not, who knows? Because, you know, I'm one guy banging a drum. But that is what I'm going to be pushing for. And there's a broader point here, which is, you know, just don't mind being blunt and rude about it. Because it's a new area, a lot of lawyers have jumped on the bandwagon here without really understanding what it is they're doing. And they don't necessarily have any great regulatory background, knowledge, or understanding or anything. And you're seeing, in part, knee-jerk reactions to things. So if you take things like the stablecoin, you know, we're going to regulate stablecoins. You think, right, okay, what does that mean? Because stablecoin is a marketing spiel. There's no such thing as a stablecoin. It was marketing spiel to say a slightly less volatile token. There is no thing that is the stablecoin. And then they go, we're going to regulate stablecoins for payment services. You think, well, but in Singapore, they simply just announced that if you use the token for a payment service, it'll be regulated in accordance with any other thing used for payment services. That's a simple solution, but we're not doing that. We're doing something else, and it's complicated. And we're picking other things where we pick a topic, you know, so, you know, derivatives referencing on regulated crypto assets. We decide they're very risky. You think, well, that's just a knee-jerk reaction. And then you get the financial promotions stuff again. You know, it's trying to get it well thought through, and the biggest issue is killing it through kindness, because you get all these people suddenly rush in, don't have the history, don't have the understanding, and just give you a knee-jerk, great, yep, we've done that, that's it, sorts are all in a better place. You know, sitting there going, there's old-fashioned, I mean, the English legal system has been around since time immemorial. Fraud, scams, misrepresentation, you know, it goes back to Victorian and all the rest of it. I mean, I was at a university where they taught Roman law. Julius Caesar, back in the day, had rules which would cover crypto assets. I mean, the idea of don't lie, don't steal, don't misrepresent is as old as the Roman legions. I mean, so the knee-jerk reaction of we need to have a completely brand new, shiny regime. Do we always, as it were, or are we just creating more paper?
It's true. It's true, and that kind of brings me on to really kind of 2 points. I think I'll go with the first one, which is the FCA discussion that you posted that, didn't you, as well? The FCA discussion on financial promotions. And you know, that had also, I mean, I haven't read all of it, again, skimmed over it, but I've read enough to know that it does have a few key points that do kind of point towards well, it's made to point towards crypto businesses and their promotion in the end of the day. So is there any of those key points that you think that people should really look at? Any particular things that you picked up from that discussion paper that right now businesses should be aware of?
I think there's two. One of which is strategic, the other one is lawyer, but both of which people need to be aware of, if you see what I mean. The first one is, what you had at the moment is people went for MLD registration in the UK. They discovered it was a slow and painful process. Then I'm off now. And they went to pick your, should we say, light regulation jurisdiction somewhere off, hopefully somewhere warm and sunny, I always hope, and run it from there. Those businesses might well get caught out by this, because this is designed to then capture, if they try and market into the UK, they'll get captured by these rules most likely. So when you see this shift of people leaving the UK to the business outside and they think they're being really clever, they might well get thumped quite hard in the long run when they can't actually sell anything into the UK. And therefore, and bear in mind, you know, these countries, low jurisdictions, to be blunt about it, they're not countries with huge populations normally. And when you need to sell a product, you need buyers. And that's why you'll pick a small country and go, it's great, there's less regulation. You're like, yeah, you can sell to them all right, but there's just very few people physically living in that country. So is that what you walk into is lack of a base. The other bit here, which is the bit I'm more worried about, is timing of all these conversations. Again, this is, thinking about thinking all, that's what I'm thinking all through. We've got consultation A. Consultation A said, if you, just before I go through it, there's two different regimes. There is FCA authorization. You get FCA authorization when you're dealing with securities or dealing with payment services. That's like basic securities law. There's then money laundering registration, completely separate regime. Okay, both of them exist completely independently of each other, and you have to comply with both, or you're going to have a problem. So so this first consultation comes out. First consultation has nothing to do with crypto whatsoever. This consultation basically says, if you are FCA authorized, you should only really be signing off those financial promotions where you actually have the knowledge and the skill to sign off the financial promotion. So it should be something you're dealing with. This sounds quite non-contentious. So if you sell equity all day, every day, you shouldn't be signing off financial promotions and bonds for a laugh if you don't really understand what a bond is. Fair enough. We then get consultation B, the crypto one. The crypto one goes, if you are going to sell unregulated crypto assets, to say Bitcoin, you should get this signed off by an FCA authorized person. But when you read the two together, the FCA authorized person can't sign off because that's not what he does. So he enters into this bit where the guy who knows about it can't sign off, and the guy who can sign off can't do it because he doesn't know about it. And we all end up in this horrible no man's land in the middle. And there are a couple of firms I have who are kind of, a couple of clients I have who straddle both spheres. They can do it. But now you've created a huge competition problem in the UK where a tiny number of institutions have both. And they basically get to control the entire industry if you're not careful, because they do it. Now, we won't be as bad as it sounds, in the sense that the sorts of people who straddle both tend to be professional signer offers on things. There are things getting sort of on a massive side track. There are people who do things like hosting and umbrellas, and these are people who professionally lend people licenses and all the rest of it. So there's a bit of something there. But even that industry is being looked at on a completely separate set of stuff by the regulator, in terms of, well, are they overreaching and are they really doing what they should do? So all these things together could end up with a horrible outcome whereby the only people who understand it are the only people who can't sign off on it. And there's a really, really, really easy fix, which is instead of saying it has to be signed up by the person who's FCA authorized, you say it has to be signed off the person who's FCA registered for MLD5 purposes. Because you have to get a license if you're going to arrange or execute any crypto asset transaction. So basically, if you're going to promote a crypto asset, then you're going to be likely arranging for people to buy it, if you see what I mean. They're two sides of the same. I know there's not exactly, but they're almost two sides of the same coin. So actually, the solution here is you simply get the registered person to do the sign off, and it will work beautifully well, and it will be magical, and it will be wonderful, and all the rest of it. And that's the one point I'm absolutely keen to make as many times as I can, because with that one small change, the whole regime will make sense.
Will make sense.
But if you persist on saying SBSC authorization, there's going to be guys like me coming up with what I call the regulatory black magic moment, where we try and find a way to make the damn thing work. But it's more a way of making the rules work, rather than, oh, these are beautiful sets of rules, we love them, and we'll get it to work smoothly, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And
I mean, like, going a step further than that, like, there is one question that we have here, which is, how do you feel that these types of legislations, both in the UK and globally, would affect advocates and people like social media marketers and influencers who are sharing about their favorite services coins? Because we have like the BitConnect incident, we had like all of these different coins that just get pumped, or, you know, sometimes it's really genuine. It's just a YouTuber going online, I've discovered this thing, you know, I really like it, and, you know, I'm talking about it, and then all of a sudden he blows up, he's got 1 million viewers. All of these people have gone and bought the coin. He's just learning the coin genuinely from you know, his own genuine perspective. He's finding out what's going on, but he continues with it because he's now got 1 million followers, or she's now got 1 million followers, and they continue to, you know, and as they go down the rabbit hole, they're learning, okay, well, there's a regulatory side to it, and then all of a sudden you're nicked, mate. You know what I should say to you, because because you've done something to fall over these rules. Because we've had like even the celebrities, you know, that John McAfee, DJ Khaled, all of these different people that have been pulled up by regulatory authorizations to say, okay, well, you know, we're going to get fined or anything. And most of them, we know, didn't really come in from the premise of, you know, we know the whole regulatory side of it. It was just like, okay, well, these people have paid us to promote a product, and that's it.
So, I mean, it's going, so, you know, in theory, if you see what I mean, if you just look at the rules, it will become more like equity. So, you know, the same way the rules around the sort of, you know, whether you should buy and sell shares in the company and all the rest will tend to kick in. There are exemptions around equity for things like things in newspaper pieces and all the rest, and genuine public type offerings. I mean, I think the bigger bit here, I mean, the financial promotion rules are really just about disclosure, if you see what I mean, at heart. A whole lot. It's about, you know, do you say the right thing? Though crypto assets can go up and go down. If they don't stick that in there, then I'm a monkey's uncle, because we love to stick that in, if you see what I mean. But there's a broader point here, which is the market manipulation rules, because you have pump and dump, you have all of that, and all exists in market, you know, all that exists for equities and financial instruments. Well, financial is another for securities. I mean, the different regulations, different things. So think securities. You know, can you do that with crypto assets? I mean, one of the things I found quite funny with the whole ICO craze was, you know, you turn up as a lawyer in an ICO and they go, we want to pay you in our token. Now, you are the lawyer, so you're really there to give an independent view on things and get it to work. If you're getting paid in the token, you're going to start biasing your thoughts towards optimizing value. Yeah, and that creates a conflict of interest there, if you see what I mean. And with these people like the social media, I mean, you know, Warren Buffett puts out a statement saying, I bought a huge stake in this, if you see what I mean. He genuinely believes in it. So that's one sort of thing. But if you're genuinely pumping something because you've already got some crypto in it to get all your, you know, I buy £1,000 worth of Dogecoin or whatever. I tell my followers to go buy it. I kick the price straight up. I sell before they can get out. Now, that's not market manipulation, because it's not security, at least under UK rules. Different regulations might take different views, if you see what I mean. But is that something ethically you want to allow to happen as a separate discussion. You know, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And it works both ways. One of my favorite ones was, you know, the whole bit with it, it's how far you go back in a transaction. Look at it. You know, if you take proceeds of crime, money laundering, you can argue that you can go all the way back on every Bitcoin to the original Genesis block of Bitcoin. At some point, Bitcoin was used for dodgy stuff back in the original early days. Therefore, anything involving a Bitcoin comes from that. Therefore, it's tainted. Therefore, it's all the proceeds of crime. We should lock up every single person in the United Kingdom or wherever who's ever held a Bitcoin because it's proceeds of crime. And I once said to the regulator, the FCA, "Are you going to do that?" And they basically told me to shut up and stop being childish and you know, they don't just ask stupid questions. And then I got interested in the £20 notes because 80% £20 notes or something like that, if you believe the press, have traces of cocaine on them. Well, that's fascinating because when I buy my Pret sandwich,
go on, say.
When I buy my Pret sandwich, they do not look at my £20 note and check it for traces of cocaine. So why is it? Because I got in a room with various banks, like, we can trace all the way back and always find a criminal offense. Like, well, you don't do it with my £20 note. Why are we now suddenly doing this with Bitcoin? And there's a huge question to me of just because you can do something and whether you should do something are two different questions. And one of the things that this technology gives us lots more power to be able to do things. The question then becomes whether we should be doing those things, and it cuts both ways. If you see what I mean, so they can say this coin is marvelous and get a profit off the back of it. Should they be doing it? And if they shouldn't be doing it, how should it be regulated and all the rest of it? And just saying, you know, I didn't know any better. I mean, that's a great excuse, but it doesn't apply to equity, if you see what I mean. And once people learn that that's not a behavior you can engage in, then the fun disappears. But if I had 2 billion followers and every time I suggested, you know, a coin would go up, I knew they'd all buy it and I make a lot of money, I might quit law and go into social media instead, if you see what I mean. So there is an element of behaving responsibly. And it's worth recognizing the regulators are doing the same, if you see what I mean. The regulators are, you know, have to find that line of, you know, how far can they go versus how far should they go? And no one ever goes, that regulator could have gone further and didn't go so far. Didn't they do well, if you see what I mean? What the regulators tend to get is shouted at on one hand for not, you know, for being slow and all the rest of it, and then shouted at the next hand when it goes wrong. So the question is from regulators, what do you want to be shouted at for?
Oh, yeah. What's the next thing to be shouted at for? Right, so we're almost towards the end. But there are a few questions that I did get from a few members of our Facebook community that I asked to throw in because I thought that, again, regulatory people want to know. So do you have any advice for, because obviously we've also got, you know, the crypto tax regulations have happened, right, as well, and are changing. So first of all, what are your thoughts yourself on crypto taxes, and you know, what is your belief around, do you feel that authority should be able to just reach in and go, well, you know, you created something out of thin air and you traded it with Mike, so we want some of that, you know, what I'm trying to say to you, like, and how do you have any advice for people on keeping track of their crypto taxes if they are trading in crypto or holding in crypto?
Sure. I mean, look, I don't think I've yet to meet the person who told me they like paying tax, if you see what I mean. There is the one that always causes you to cringe is the bloke who turns to him and goes, what is this tax? I've never heard of tax. I'm beyond life. I mean, that's never going to fly. What you're going to get is the tax authority is looking like this. And, you know, their start for 10 is what does it look like? And whatever it looks like is where they're going to go next. That's going to be their starting position. And, you know, how can I put this? You get the scare stories, which are, you know, HMRC are going to destroy the entire tax world by having a special tax because they just hate crypto people. The number of times I hear it from someone, the regulators just hate us. I'm thinking the regulators have got bigger problems than you. I don't mean this in a nasty way, but they're more worried about the entire financial system imploding when they're not looking. So that's not what they're about, if you see what I mean. all tax authorities, if you get to meet the tax authorities who didn't want you to pay tax, they're going to clock in. I think one of the things which is interesting is that there are various reliefs around tax for things like shares, like EIS relief and all those sorts of things. A lot of the reason that those exist is with a view to promoting innovation, new ideas, and that kind of thing. If you go to a regulator and go, I've bought some Bitcoin, I don't want to pay tax ever again, I cannot immediately see where the innovation, we've done good for the economy, that kind of argument comes in for that. But if you want to start persuading them to make it work for some of the and bear in mind, they're going to take a functional approach to start with 10, so that, find something they know and love and say, this is that, really, if you see what I mean. That's a good place to start. And start pushing them towards, if you've got an ISA, and an ISA, you don't pay tax on the shares you buy and sell. Are there tokens out there where actually the idea that people buy that is good for the economy, it should be encouraged, and therefore we suggest they should be in an ISA wrapper? Just an idea, if you see what I mean. So there's that side to it. So, the short answer, if you don't pay any tax, then, tax authorities are not going to look, they're going to get stroppy, if you see what I mean. Which tax you pay becomes a question as to how it lays out, usually, and as to what it mirrors, if you see what I mean. In terms of keeping track, difficult. Well, you need an audit trail. I mean, probably my favorite words of all time, but audit trail is key. There are people out there who are now putting together software packages to help. I don't know which ones are good and all the rest of it, but there are people out there, if you see what I mean, who will help people do that, and that you might find helpful. But the nature of this stuff is supposed to be that there's permanent records, if you see what I mean, which are famous last words. But it's keep a record of what you've done, and do an honest assessment. And when in doubt, bring in the accountant or the tax lawyer, depending on how grim your afternoon is looking. And then you've got that external help to also help you do it, if you see what I mean. But at the end of the day, there are various people who, as soon as they hear the word blockchain or crypto, they forget everything they know and they look to reinvent the entire wheel from scratch. Whereas actually what you want is people who go, this looks like that we know, we can defend that, let's go with that, if you see what I mean. So we're heading towards more clarity, because the HMRC give out guidance, and it's a question of keeping track of exactly what happened, and then it's defending it is usually the key. But HMRC just want to get paid tax, if you see what I mean, because that's what they exist for that purpose, if you see what I mean. So don't be surprised when they come in. I had one where one of my clients charges VAT on what he does, and basically none of his competitors bothered to charge VAT, because they've basically gone we don't pay tax for it because it's bad for you, or something like that, which seems to be the defense. And you're sitting there going, well, that's now a massive red flag to a bull, because what they do is they take an entire group of people and they go after them and make them all pay tax. I'm saying consolation. Lawyers were getting whacked by HMRC for not paying enough tax. So I mean, it's nothing specific to crypto in the slightest, if you see what I mean. And one of the things I thought was really funny was the rumor, maybe a week or so back, where basically there's this rumor that HMRC were going to go after crypto people for not paying enough tax. Said, no, we go after everyone who doesn't pay enough tax. We don't want to be seen as.
And they laughed, didn't they? They were just like, "What are you talking about? Like, I've got my wallet over here. Here's my ledger." Like,
and they're not asking to declare how many crypto assets you have, but that's not, that's not. I mean, that's just the way they see the world. They want to know what you have so you can pay tax.
Yeah, you can pay tax.
It's not a deliberate conspiracy of the deep nature. It's just, please pay tax.
Okay, so I'd say, right, so last two questions. First of all, are there any projects that you're currently involved in personally that you'd like to talk about, or let any of the viewers just know about from personal interest even?
Always challenging a lawyer, because you get whacked more confidentiality than you can take a stick at. I've got some really interesting projects at the moment.
Mhm.
I'm going to talk macro levels, if you don't mind. So
Yeah, of course.
macro level, what I'm seeing is there's a move towards DeFi. DeFi can be awesome and can be terrible. Where it is awesome is where it is for operational robustness and resilience. Those sorts of projects work really well, and it works well when I mean, and it works well when there's a sort of a good purpose behind it, if you see what I mean. Where it works badly is one, when you announce it's a way of not playing rules, because that's just going to irritate everyone. Second of all, lending to consumers is the most regulated thing on earth, as far as I'm concerned, to the point whereby if you miss an and out in the contract where you do it, the entire thing can be void and you can get whacked hard. So do not lend to consumers using DeFi unless you just hate yourself or you love paying huge legal bills. And I think the regulators are gearing up in DeFi and looking at it, and it's a question getting it to work. And the AML stuff, there's some interesting stuff around that and DeFi and how it interrelates. And what's interesting there is the regulators are aware, at least in the UK, that some of the AML rules are just a bit old. And I think, if you want to talk to DeFi with the FCA, this is a good time to have a chat with them, because they are learning about it, and there's that side of it. There's the NFT side of it. A lot of NFTs remind me of ICOs, if you see what I mean, whereby, it's a question in the mind of the buyer whether it's a good idea or not. But that's not all NFTs. And we're dealing with a couple of projects where actually, there is an NFT involved, but there's a lot more to it than a pretty picture on a JPEG.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing there is whether you buy in or don't buy into NFTs, to me, is linked to whether you buy on or don't buy into modern art, because it's the same core niche coming to the fore. And that I think is the second group. We're seeing people coming up with new investment projects, and I think what's interesting there is you're actually getting a leak back, things like GameStop and the like. So the crypto mentality actually linking back to traditional equities, and equities are being played with a bit like crypto, which annoys Warren Buffett, but it's quite fun for guys like me to watch as an observer, if you see what I mean. And broadly, we're just seeing lots and lots and lots of things happening, if you see what I mean. And we're seeing everything from new tokens to new platforms to funds. The entire industry is taking off at the moment, and it's brilliant. And when I started in this, it was you considered really weird for caring. It was sort of something you did as a hobby, if you see what I mean. And you sort of think, well, I'm really one of these lawyers, but I do this thing off to the side. Now it's just grown and grown and grown. And for the foreseeable future. And I think it's now here to stay. I mean, there were a couple of moments in my career where I thought, is this entire thing going to disappear in one afternoon? And it's going to be the thing that nobody ever heard of. But that is simply not the case. And the amount of money pouring into something, particularly in the US, is huge. And one of the things I think is going to be really interesting moving forwards is what happens with all that money. Is there going to be a huge buying spree? Because you look at biotech, the way you've got a huge number of mergers selling in biotech, we've got a whole lot of things come together. And you've got Coinbase raising a whole lot of money. Will it go out on a shopping spree and buy a whole lot of exchanges, if you do something? And I've got clients who now have some clients who never want to get bought ever. They have their project, they love it. And I have other clients who basically were trying to get bought from the moment they opened the door. You see what I mean? There's would you like to buy my company, please, sir? Because that's what it's built for. And the entire the structure of the UK markets are built to sell companies to people, if you see what I mean. If you want, but the way that the UK M&A market works, it's designed to buy and sell stuff. So at the moment, I've got a lot of clients doing fundraising. I think that will be followed up by mergers and acquisitions coming in. And I think because the way crypto people see the world, will then get a wave of new things coming in again, because I do not see the crypto world as sitting, they're not, I mean, for this, some industries, you build your company, you sell your company, you sit back, you're bored, you do minimum management, everyone's a happy bunny. That's not the way a lot of crypto guys see the world.
Yeah.
They'll go and do something new, whizzy, different, and all the rest of it. And that's where I think other activities like quantum computing and that sort of thing, that they combine. And where I think some of the interesting stuff is where you take something like, blockchain in itself is not interesting. Blockchain is interesting when you combine it with smart contracts. and then I'll so intertwine that people mean smart contracts and blockchain when they refer to just blockchain. When you combine them with AI, you get a set of new innovations. When you combine it with quantum computing, you get another set of innovation. And it's had its iPad moments. The iPad moments, like when you get something new. And whereas with the iPad, you just got iterations of the iPad. What you're going to get here is different. You're going to get the iPad that is blockchain mixed with, I have no idea, I'm trying to think of something else. Another thing to get something completely new is your Internet of Things plus blockchain equals whole new sets of ideas. And I think that's going to be the next few years.
Wow. Viewers, you're getting a lot of knowledge in this one interview, just one interview. So there's so many more of these to come, and I'm sure everyone that loves this, I'm sure I will bump into James. We're both from the UK. You're in London, James, yeah? London?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we bumped into each other through other associates in the space. So you guys are getting a real gem here, lots and lots of information. Now, lastly, I think we'll ask about the COVID period, the coronavirus period first. And it's like, during that period, obviously there's a lot of good changes going on in the blockchain crypto industry, but were there any kind of adverse effects or, obviously outside of NDAs, do you feel that any of your clients or anyone around you saw like a massive adverse effect, or anything that you saw affected or you experienced personally that affected the crypto or blockchain industry in the UK?
I think honestly, the biggest bad effect, if that's the right way of putting it, is the FCA got whacked with COVID. At the same time, it got whacked with Brexit. At the same time, it got whacked for everything else. And as a result, there's only so many thumps an organization can have and keep at the speed and all the rest of it. And, what I find quite funny is we are naturally very demanding of our regulators, and rightly so, if you see what I mean, but we expect them to behave at a certain level. And other countries, I've dealt with regulators where they just laugh at you if you see what I mean, if you do that. And because the regulators have a whole lot of this at once, it has created a slowdown within the speed at which they're able to work. And that then manifests itself with complaints and all the rest of it, at the speed at which registrations and the like are going on. And when you speak to the guys at the FCA, they've just got so many things on at once. It's just sort of having the night sleep so they can move on to the next part of it, if you see what I mean. I think one of the great things as we come out of lockdown and all the rest of it is, hopefully the ball will slow down, the registration backlog will start to cure, and we can all start moving forwards fast, if you see what I mean. And what nice things I've seen is the reaction has been, it hasn't been a, we just ban it. It's been a, we need to hire more people, we need to bring in the expertise, but these things all take time. And in the short term, it has created a problem for the industry because the industry cannot move as fast forward as it likes. And, the crypto project, when you set up a fund, it is assumed it's going to take you X number of months to get the fund up, if you see what I mean. That's just built into it. In crypto, it's like, oh, I want to get going tomorrow. And you're sitting there going, no, we can't move at that speed because the backlog is so great. So I think that's been the biggest issue for COVID. I mean, for me personally, it's been slightly weird because I've actually moved law firms during first lockdown, and I've yet to actually physically meet anyone at GunnerCooke, which is weirdly not as bad as I thought it was going to be, as I've just got socializing with lawyers is probably overrated as it went, and we're probably good in small doses. But it's leading to new ideas because, there was a time when it was assumed that if you were a proper grown-up sensible lawyer, you had to go into a physical office, work into a team, and have endless meetings where we achieve very little, if you see what I mean. Actually, under the GunnerCooke model, you tend to work from home. You tend not to have chargeable hours. It tends to be more fixed fee. And actually, that creates a far better relationship for what you can do with your clients. Because, me having a team meeting with 12 people in a law firm is of absolutely no use to my clients whatsoever. Having me on the end of a phone or at the top of a hat there and then, they rather like, if you see what I mean. So I think it's one where, there are a lot of bad things from COVID and, and all the rest of it, but it's learning that. And finding the best of it. I mean, the thing I think is slightly funny is when you look at some of the older model firms, it's we must go back into the office with no why or thought through response. You know, oh, we're going back now, so we have team meetings, so we can spend 3 hours talking about stuff no one cares about. If you see what I mean, when we listen to the great and good, see what they have to say. Whereas actually, you know, you as a lawyer want to be with your clients as much as possible, and given the nature of the system, you know, your fees are actually less if you're not wasting time on things no one cares about, if you see what I mean.
Exactly.
So for me, it's been very much a positive experience, although the quality of coffee has dropped, which is a blow. So I used to buy really good coffee from a guy. So I'm really hoping he's still there, if you see what I mean. So I've got better at making coffee. The coffee's now reasonable, but not quite at his standard. I don't know how he does it, to be honest. So the coffee's dropped. But yeah, look, we're going to bounce back. It's going to work well, if you see what I mean. And I think we're very fortunate in the UK that the vaccination program has been as quick as it has, because I was speaking to people in other countries and they're saying September, October before they even start vaccination programs. So I think you've got to sort of, look at what you've got. But it will change, and it will change everything, if you see what I mean, in the sense that, you're going to get geopolitical shifts off the back of this, and I think it'll be interesting to see what turns up next. But for the crypto industry as a whole, it's showing you we can work digitally. It's showing you it does work, if you see what I mean. And so the impetus is now in the room. One of the funniest things I ever saw was a guy who said, what drove digital transformation in your firm? Was the CEO or CTO or COVID? The answer is probably COVID.
That's a good one. That is a very good one. Right, James, thanks a lot for coming on the show today, giving
an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Knowledge to the people, because as we believe in the regular people, they need to have people to everybody rushes in with that, I want to make money off of Bitcoin, and they need to have a well-rounded view. So again, that's the reason why we started these inside blockchain interviews. And as I said to you before, we're trying to get as flat on the wall as possible and let everybody know. So thanks again for coming along and coming along. Well, thanks a lot for jumping on your computer for us this afternoon and giving us your insight. Is there any way that people can get hold of you or be able to reach out to you? What's your main channels of contact, so people can, if they want to find out more or even employees?
Yeah, sure. So thank you very much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure and great fun. If you want to contact me, you can either send an email to james.burnie, that's BURNIE, @GunnerCooke, GUNNERCOOKE.com, or I'm LinkedIn addict. So if you put James Burnie in, that's BURNIE again. To be honest, there's not many James Burnies in the world. We all come from one Scottish clan, I think, originally. So you'll find me relatively easily. Although ironically, that's called genetically predisposed to end up in blockchain, as I've met more family relatives through blockchain than I have actually through my own family, which is like weird. Including one of the regulators in one of the countries is a Burnie, and one of the professors, I think it was at KCL, there's another Burnie, as it were. So I don't know if there's something in the blood, but there's obviously something in the DNA which says you're going to end up in blockchain.
Blockchain is literally bringing families together as well. So listen, James, again, it's been a pleasure, and thanks again. Those details also will be in the bottom of the link for the description, in the description once the video goes up. So everybody who's viewing this, you'll be able to just pop down there and just grab that link and get in contact, and blockchain to the future.